friends.
I'm Tabby.
And I'm Caitlin. And this is part 2 of The Silent Patient.
If you did not see part 1, we do a synopsis of the book. So if you haven't read it or you just don't want to read it and you want to know what it's about, go listen to part 1 and then come back here and join us on part 2.
I am going to kick us off on Goodreads. Tabby and I use Goodreads a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We track our books there, but also this is about to be kind of a cool little thing that we add in because Alex Michaelides, who is the author of The Silent Patient, wrote notes to give a little bit of insight into the novel. So he writes a note on the excerpt. The painting was a self-portrait. She titled it on the bottom left-hand corner of the canvas in light blue Greek lettering, one word, Alcestis. He said, "The Greek myths are hard to escape growing up in Cyprus, as I did. You were taught Homer from the age of 13 in school, and the tragedies are constantly being performed and reimagined. I came across the tragedy Alcestis by Euripides when I was 13. Alcestis dies to save her husband Admetus, and then is brought back to life by Heracles at the end of the play. But when Alcestis is reunited with her husband, she refuses to speak, much like our girl Alicia." He said, "It's a problematic play for all kinds of reasons. It's not often performed largely, I think, because of this silence. Is she overjoyed to see him, or is she furious he allowed her to die for him? Something about this refusal to conclude, to explain, has haunted me for years, as well as something about Alcestis herself. She was sacrificed, deemed disposable by the man she loved most in the world. This sense of being made to feel unworthy struck a chord with me. I searched for a way to update it and tell that story for years, but it was only after I worked in a secure psychiatric unit that I had the idea of setting the story inside a psychiatric hospital with the structure of a detective story. And instead of a detective, I would have a psychotherapist. But it was a real challenge having a mute heroine. At some point in the book, her silence is described like a mirror, reflecting yourself back at you. Silence is her only weapon. She has no recourse other than silence because no one will believe her story. I think a lot of people, particularly women, can relate to that." So Alex Michaelides,
Our feminist icon.
Yeah, feminist icon. We stand. The next excerpt that he comments on is, "The real motivation was purely selfish. I was on a quest to help myself. I believe the same is true for most people who go into mental health. Speak for yourself, Theo. We are drawn to this profession because we are damaged. We study psychology to heal ourselves." So Alex says, "I'm very fond of Theo, as troubled as he is. Early on in the book, he says he became a psychotherapist because he was messed up. That was certainly my experience, and I believe a lot of therapists are drawn to this profession because on some level they feel damaged and wish to heal themselves. Whether they are prepared to admit this or not is another question. I feel that Theo, like all of us, tries to justify himself. Everyone is the hero of their own story, after all. I think Theo's motives, at least in his own mind, were benign. A wish to help Alicia heal, as he says. In a sense, that's no different to the motive of any therapist, even if his methods were a little different." Which, you're kind of losing me there a little bit, Alex.
Yeah, I don't fully agree with you there, buddy.
Let's not support Theo too unconditionally.
He didn't he was wrong.
Yeah, he was wrong. The next excerpt says, "The development of our personalities doesn't take place in isolation, but in relationship with others. We are shaped and completed by unseen, unremembered forces, namely our parents." That hits hard.
That hit, yeah.
So Alex says, "I studied psychotherapy at a postgrad level, although I didn't graduate, as I decided I was a writer, not a therapist. But I had a lot of therapy myself, 10 years or so, and felt I had never really seen a therapy session in a book that resembled my own experience. I was very keen to explore trauma in the novel and to ask the question of whether we can recover from traumatic childhood or not. My own personal opinion is that it's possible to recover from a traumatic childhood if you hold it in awareness and understand what happened to you and why. But if you are in denial about it or lying to yourself, then you are more likely to be condemned to reenact and repeat it. We need to understand not only what happened to us when we were children, but also what happened to our parents when they were children. Only by understanding can we forgive others and ourselves." And I will speak to this a little bit because, first of all, if any of you are considering counseling, but you haven't taken that step, you should. I think if you're considering it at all, you absolutely should. There's really no downside, aside from that it can be expensive, unfortunately, in America. Love that for us.
Love
but it's definitely something I recommend. And when I did counseling myself, one of the things that I was struggling with was my father, unfortunately, is kind of the worst. And so we talked a lot about that. And my counselor did have me acknowledge what happened to my parents when he was a child and how is that affecting how he parented me. So it's definitely something that becomes a cycle. If you guys are kind of familiar with the term generational trauma, it's kind of just the fact that you keep doing things the wrong way over and over again, and
it never changes.
It never really resolves itself. So you have to acknowledge it before you can fix it.
Yeah.
The next excerpt is somehow grasping at vanishing snowflakes is like grasping at happiness, an act of possession that instantly gives way to nothing. So he says, the end of the novel links up with this. People often ask me why the end of the book references snowflakes. It's because in the final moments of his story, Theo thinks back to a brief moment in his childhood when he felt free and life was full of possibility. That kind of answers some questions we had there.
Crushed my heart.
The next passage is, it's odd how quickly one adapts to the strange new world of a psychiatric unit. You become increasingly comfortable with madness, and not just the madness of others, but your own. We're all crazy, I believe, just in different ways. So Alex says, I used to work at a secure psychiatric unit for teenagers, and it became an increasingly important part of my life. I would probably still be there now if the unit had not been closed down when all the National Health Service cuts were made after the 2008 banking crisis. It was a therapeutic community, which is a highly powerful but not particularly cost-effective form of therapy. For example, a group of adolescents will stay for a period of up to 4 years, immersed in the community, which includes therapists, doctors, nurses, and where all activities and therapies are group-based, and all decisions regarding a patient's care are made by the group. It's a powerful healing process for these damaged young people who suddenly find themselves, after so much abuse, in the bosom of a highly functioning and caring family. I don't love the use of the word bosom, but that's
disgusting.
That's on me. He said it's an increasingly rare form of therapy, unfortunately, and it was a privilege to experience it. It changed me on a very deep level. I didn't know I was going to write The Silent Patient then, and I never used any of the stories or people I encountered there, but I kept a record of the atmosphere and my own emotional reactions. I used them in the novel, and that was very helpful. But I must say, I have an ambivalent relationship to therapy. The problem is it all comes down to the skill of the individual therapist, and I encouraged some very bad... Oh, sorry. He did not encourage them. He encountered some very bad therapists.
I was like, dang, okay.
I encourage it with precious little empathy or insight. That is, I'm sure, very true. I even witnessed elements of sadism. Interesting. That was another reason why I quit my training. I don't care how many letters you have after your name or how many books you've written. If you know nothing about compassion or humility, then you have nothing to teach me. Damn, Alex.
Okay.
Love that. So then he comments on a quote by Sigmund Freud. Our boy Sigmund.
Rude dude.
The quote is, unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways. So Alex says, again, this comes back to the importance of holding your own story in awareness. Before you can heal the damaged parts of yourself, you must get them into the light and have a good look. Repression and denial never bring anything good.
Looking at you, Theo.
Good advice. Yeah, Theo, my boy. So this passage is a little longer. It says, I know now that when I have an agenda for a picture, a predetermined idea how it should turn out, it never works out. It remains stillborn, lifeless. But if I'm really paying attention, really aware, I sometimes hear a whispering voice pointing me in the right direction. And if I give into it as an act of faith, it leads me somewhere unexpected. Not where I intended, but somewhere intensely alive, glorious, and the result is independent of me with a life force of its own. So Alex says, this is a very personal passage for me. This is very much my voice speaking through Alicia. I'm not a painter, so I transposed what it feels like for me as a writer. The more I meditate and operate in a state of awareness when I write, the more likely I will catch that whispering voice of inspiration pointing me in the right direction. Unless you are very quiet and still, it's often easy to miss. Which that one is kind of like, I don't know, I'm not really a super artistic person, so that doesn't resonate as much with me, but I'm sure it means a lot to people who are creators. But anyway, yeah, those are Alex's thoughts on some of the passages from his novel.
No, I like that because some of it is like stuff that like he kind of left it open to interpretation. So I'm glad to see what, his stance on it was.
Yeah, like what he was thinking when he wrote it. It is interesting because then you can compare it to what you were thinking.
Because his thoughts on Theo were way different than my thoughts on Theo. So I like to know like where his head was at when he was writing that.
I also feel like whenever you create a character, you probably have a lot more love for them, like because you're going to feel connected to them in some way. I feel like no matter the character, there's going to be some kind of piece of you in that character.
For sure.
Like, I don't know how you could avoid it. I think that's probably where his connection to Theo is a little more strong, probably.
For sure. Well, what were your just overall thoughts and feelings about it? What would you rate it?
Overall thoughts, 5 out of 5 stars. I love this book. It's one of my favorites. This is actually the second time I've read it, and it still held up for me.
Yeah. I was super hesitant to read this book because I don't typically do this, but I made the mistake of going on Goodreads and reading the reviews, and people were not happy with it. People did not like this book. And so I was just like, oh God, I'm going to hate it. No, I was shocked by how much I enjoyed it. Like, I usually am pretty good about like putting stuff together. No, I was thrown for a loop. I had no freaking clue what the ending was going to be. I was pleasantly shocked, and it was a super good book. 5 out of 5.
I agree. He does an amazing job of interweaving the storylines because the first time I read it, I thought that the storyline with Kathy was going on at the exact same time as with Alicia. And so I was so caught off guard by the end because I was like, oh, this is a flashback.
Well, and it makes it so much funnier too. Like there's almost like a humor aspect or a humor element to it too. Because like looking back and like going through when he's talking to like all these side characters and like all these people and like they're telling him about what they saw and what they heard. He's just like, oh, it's so crazy.
Yeah.
That's wild that happened.
Yes, we were talking about like especially when he visits the neighbor Barbie and she's like, Alicia saw a man was stalking her.
And he's like, what? A man was stalking her.
That is a wild.
Yeah, so just stuff like that, like looking back on it, it's like I should have seen it coming, but like I didn't, because like how are you supposed to know that those were flashbacks? Yeah. And it makes more sense too. What makes sense is that like the flash or like the storylines never converged at any point in time. And so like no one ever met Kath or whatever her name was, like no one ever met his wife. Like he didn't really talk much about her like while he was at work. And like there were big like pointers to indicate like they were two different timelines. But until you read that, like you had no idea.
Yeah. And so the only time he does mention Kathy, like in the context of the Grove, is he like goes out for a drink with Yuri.
Yeah.
And Yuri is like, what about you? Are you married? And he's like, yeah. And then that's when he has like the flashback to when he first met Kathy and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's like clearly a flashback for us there. But then every other time we're just assuming like, oh, he's getting off work and going home.
It's actually just consistent flashbacks.
Yeah. But that's the whole point is like, you're supposed to like get to the end and be like, oh my God.
Oh my God.
And he did a great job of it. So when you were like reading this for the first time, and it's hard for me to like kind of go back to that first time, but why did you think Theo was like so hung up on helping her? Because it was weird. He like quit his job and got a new job for her.
So initially I thought it was because they were like a kindred spirit almost. Like they were two sides of the same coin. It's like every time Theo would talk about like his family's past and like all this stuff, like how it like shaped him, I think he felt that with Alicia almost. And
Yeah.
so he wanted to see like what happened to like make her reach her breaking point when he hadn't reached his because he had Ruth. And so I
He's
think
like, I'm next.
yeah, I think he wanted to like step into that same advisory role that Ruth had for him and do that for her. Looking back on it now, it's just because he's trying to like placate his guilt. But
Yeah.
like that's initially what I thought was because he wanted to provide to someone else what Ruth gave to him.
Yeah. And I genuinely can't remember what I thought when I was first reading it, but that seems reasonable to me.
I think he was also just an overly confident person. And you kind of saw that too when he first walked in and talked with Diomedes. And he's like, well, I know you couldn't do it, but I can.
Yeah.
Thing. And so like I also think he kind of like I initially thought he saw it as like the biggest ultimate challenge. And if he could do
True.
that, he would prove that he was worth, everything and not worthless like what his father always told him.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with you that, like, on some level, he probably did feel that way because on page 132, Theo is saying something bad happened to Alicia, probably early in her childhood, to provoke those murderous impulses that emerged all those years later. So it's like he's the whole time revealing he's also had a traumatic childhood. So he's probably like, okay, so if she can snap, like what's preventing me from snapping? And like, how do we like make it so that people don't necessarily get to that point where they, give in to those
Kill somebody.
murderous impulses? Another thing, when she was on trial and they like John Felix displayed the Alcestis. We didn't know anything about John Felix at the beginning, but like that's who would have displayed it. What are your thoughts on that? I feel like it's pretty fucked up.
Initially, when I read it, I was just like, dude, like that's kind of in poor taste because she literally just murdered her husband. And that was the artwork that she created from I don't like it obviously wasn't guilt, it was anger that she felt towards him. Like initially I thought it was guilt. Like I thought she'd created that, I don't know, like to express like what she was expressing what she was feeling, but we didn't know the story of Alcestis at that point or like what had happened to her necessarily. And so I thought it was in poor taste that he did that. And then knowing more about John Felix when like he just wanted like notoriety from her work, like it's even worse.
It's so messed up too because she like one of the last conversations she had with him was like, I'm switching galleries, like this partnership is over basically. And then all of this happens and he's like, oh, I'm gonna profit.
Well, no one knows that, so
it's so honestly everyone in Alicia's life kind of treated her like garbage.
So that was the thing that like the one thing I maybe didn't like about the book, and it's not even that I didn't even like it, I did not like any of the characters. Like I feel like individually they all had shit going on that like made them bad people because like I feel bad for Alicia, that her husband was cheating on her, that caused her to have a mental break, but like she also was like not super kind to him even before she knew that he was cheating on her. Like she refused to get help, like she did not want to. I mean, I know that seeing Dr. West was not like good for her, like that was a bad choice on her husband's part, but like she's just kind of aggressive towards like her husband and like had like fits of rage and like
but it's kind of like if those are symptoms of mental illness, she wasn't getting like the help she needed at the same time. And I'm not like I'm not saying
advocating for herself either though.
Yeah, true.
No one was advocating for her though.
Yeah. It was like it's a really tough thing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the people who were in her life that were supposed to love and care for her, I don't think were doing a good job because she really needed them. Like it was hard for her to fix those things on her own because of her mental illness. So definitely,
but I think that was
really dropped the ball.
Yeah, that was the cool thing about it too, is that like you really did get to see the humanity of everybody and how like he didn't sugarcoat it by any means. Like that was a very real situation that probably happens to a lot of people. And so I mean, I'm glad that he put it in the book form. It just like, I don't know, I had a hard time like connecting with all of the characters.
I did feel very disconnected. Like I was just watching the story.
Yeah.
And a lot of times with a story, I will feel a bit more invested. Like I can see more of myself in the characters.
No, I was a spectator in this book. Like,
yeah, 100% agree. So with like Alicia's diary entries, especially at the beginning, like, did you think, like, reading about all those things, like, leading up to the murder,
Yeah.
did you think she was the one who killed him, or did you think she was, like, framed?
No, I definitely thought she was the one who killed him.
Yeah.
Like, at first, I was like, she had to have been framed. But I think because, like, I don't know, I was just like kind of had the hunch that she killed him because, like,
Yeah.
she was like obsessed with him to the point of it being like dangerous. And so
Yeah.
that's why I figured that she killed him, because she was basically like, if I were to not have him, I wouldn't want to be here either. And so I figured she did have like some psychological break and killed him and was like, all right, I'll be out of my way too.
Yeah,
So
because like when she painted him on the cross, like,
yeah,
bestie, that's not
not
that's
healthy.
not a normal thing to do.
Yeah, no, I definitely thought she killed him.
Yeah, I can't remember what I thought the first time I read it, but I don't know. There's a good chance that I maybe thought she was innocent at first. I don't know.
Well, what did it for me, what convinced me of it, was when she did paint him as Jesus, like on the cross, because like it was almost a sort of like religious dedication to him, and like she so wholly believed that he was there to like help her get better, and like she did not want to let him down, and she did not want to disappoint him, and like she's willing to do anything for him. Like that type of dedication is unhealthy, and like that just showed like how like not mentally stable she was. So yeah, that was like when I was like, yeah, no, she killed this man.
Yeah, you're like, oh,
that ain't right.
She's crazy.
Nice to go.
It's funny. I feel like I'm like basically asking you a bunch of questions about this,
That's
but it's
fine.
because
You've already
like
read it.
so for those of you guys who don't know, usually Tabby is the one that's read a book and recommends it to me. So I kind of feel powerful right now, having been the one who read this first. Let's talk about Professor Diomedes, because of all the characters, I loved him the most. Oh, and Indira. I feel like they both actually genuinely cared about their patients.
I think Indira was an inherently good person.
I do too. I think they legitimately, both of them, wanted their patients to get the best care.
Don't. So I actually think Diomedes was trying to get his claim to fame and then dip out, because like he knew they were going to shut down, but he's like, they will shut down when we figure out what the fuck's going on with this lady. And then they did. And he's like, he retired early, and I'm sure they probably were like, you should retire early, but no, like he retired early, like she was dead, like brain dead in a bed, and he was like, bet, like we accomplished what we set out to do, like I will see y'all later.
But I feel like on that same, like on the flip side of that coin, he could have been like, I'm not willing to let this place go until I help this one woman, which is kind of how I don't know, I interpreted him as a character who like really did want the best for his patients. I just feel like he didn't have
it was just
the
like
necessary
the
means.
Second that Theo was like, she said a singular word to me, he was like, great, call the board, call the press, like we need her to do an interview. And it's like, she said one word, like she's not fully talking in sentences. And so that's why I kind of felt like he was trying to do it for the clout. Like he wanted to be the institution that
that part I can definitely see that side. When I first read it, I think I interpret it more as like he was like really excited, but yeah, I don't think that would have been the right thing to do for sure. Like that was a bad call on his part, but luckily Theo was like, no, let's see if she can form a sentence first.
Well, I also wonder if like I wonder if they had told him about the diary, and like that was part of the reason why he left. I don't know, but then I don't know why he would have been like, yeah, this man needs to be the one who takes over for me. I'm not sure.
No, I don't think he probably did know about that. He was just like, yeah, Theo, he works hard. He's like, he really cares about this one specific patient.
She's really good.
He's really good at his job. Another thing that I think is like interesting, because okay, so Alicia, sorry, did murder Gabriel. Like that is a fact. But it took it took a very specific situation for her to snap. And so I do think it's interesting that she had such violent outbursts against Elif on two separate scenarios.
I don't think it's weird because if you'll remember when she like one of her very first diary entries, she said that she has these dark thoughts, but she's using the diary to only put like positive, happy, creative thoughts in there. But like she'll get on a roll and start describing stuff, and she'll be like, yeah, and if this happens, like I'll probably, and then she'll kind of drift off and be like, no, we're not going to go there. Like this is for positive thoughts. And so I think she was having like these negative and violent thoughts, and like she was trying to like convince herself that it was like all in her head. So I think it took like that psychotic break to release like that negative mindset that she's always had.
Yeah, and it could be that like, yeah, once she snapped, it was just like there now.
Yeah.
But I just felt like it was kind of misplaced, like against Elif. And I know Elif like said things to provoke her. Like, so the first time she attacked Elif, it's because she asked Alicia if Gabriel deserved it. And like, that seems like a pretty normal thing for someone to ask. But Alicia, she snapped.
The second time she doesn't make sense though, because if you'll remember, like she figured out who Gabriel was or who Theo was that first time that she attacked him. Like she recognized him and got pissed off and like attacked him because he's the one who set all of that up. And that's when she started like trying to like play with his mind basically. And so I think she attacked Elif the second time because she was like, yeah, that man's falling in love with you and he cares about you and blah, blah, blah. And she's just like, fuck no, he doesn't care about me. Like this dude ruined my life. And so then she like got angry and attacked Elif. That still shouldn't have done it, but
well, yeah, but she also is unstable. Yeah. But yeah, that does make sense because also then if we want to kind of lump them together, like they both tie back to Gabriel and like how he died. So that does make sense that would be like a trigger for her. So earlier we talked about how Alicia and Theo are kind of like parallels of each other. They both had super traumatic childhoods. Yeah. And we don't get as much detail with Theo, but I will pull up this passage. He does mention that basically he had an abusive father. And so on page 102, he's visiting Ruth at this point. And Ruth is like, I want you to consider the possibility that you felt this sadness long before you met Kathy. It's one you've been carrying around for many years. And she goes on to say, is the pain of not being loved. And then he's like, is all of this inevitable? I set myself up for this. Is it hopeless? And Ruth says, it's not hopeless. You're not a boy at the mercy of your father anymore. You're a grown man now and you have a choice. And so that's when she's like, leave. Like you couldn't leave when it was your father.
No.
But now you're an adult, so leave.
Do you think it's crazy that literally everything could have been avoided if he had just confronted Kathy about her cheating?
Yeah, and then he like acts like Alicia's the unstable one. Like, sir, you caused literally.
I'm like, you're just pretending she's not cheating on you, and then going after the wrong people. Like,
yeah, and then like tying them up in their own home. So on page 191, he says, I had a sudden image of myself as a child. A little boy close to bursting with anxiety, holding in all my terrors, all my pain, pacing endlessly, restless, scared, alone, with the fears of my crazy father. No one to tell, no one who'd listen. Alicia must have felt similarly desperate, or she'd never have confided in Barbie. And so he's like seeing himself in her position, for sure. Alicia's mother, on the other hand.
What the fuck was that about? Like, I thought he just sprinkled that and she's like, yeah, she put us in her Mini Cooper and drove us into a brick wall. And I was like, what?
Yeah. So this is not exactly where the parallel comes in. The parallel comes in more with their fathers, but Alicia's mother, for background, was also mentally ill. I mean, it can be assumed. She was also mentally ill. And like Tabby said, tried to kill herself and her daughter, kind of left her husband out of it, which is interesting. That you would bring your kid into it, but not your husband. But yeah, so then it's brought up later. Alicia painted a portrait of her mother's accident. And so in the painting, like her mother's there and like her soul's leaving her body, but Alicia is not in the painting. So Theo asks, is this because she considers it her mother's tragedy only since she is the only one who died? And again, this is when Alicia is not talking. So, I mean, if she responded at all, it was probably just a blink or
Like
two.
a blinker or something. Yeah. I don't know. Like, I thought that was just a very weird thing to put into the story. Like, it added to her trauma and stuff because, like, at the time, he was trying to make everyone think that she was crazy because it's like, oh, well, both of her parents killed themselves. So, like, apple doesn't fall from the tree type thing.
Mhm.
But, like, as much as that's probably a catalyst for her having like declining mental health, I don't think that what pushed her over was her husband not loving her. Like the other stuff, I think she could have survived from, but
Yeah, but still, it would have been rough. Like it would have
yeah.
been something you would have to address. And I'm not sure she
Yeah.
ever did. Um,
And she didn't want to either.
yeah, she kind of was just like, no, Gabriel will fix me.
Yeah. It's like Gabriel's not Jesus.
My Lord and Savior, Gabriel.
Yeah. That whole thing was just weird.
She is weird.
And like everyone said that too throughout the whole book. Like I was like, yeah, Gabriel doesn't seem that bad. And everyone's just like, yeah, no, Gabriel's like a prick. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And then it's like he's cheating on this whole time. I'm like, oh man, he is a prick. And like we were just seeing him through her eyes.
Yeah, I know. And it is interesting too because Max, Gabriel's older brother, like had so much love for Gabriel, but there also was that dynamic of Gabriel was the biological child of their parents,
Mhm.
but Max was adopted. So there was jealousy there. And Max did try to like Mr. Steal girl to his
Yeah.
own brother. So it is weird because like he loved Max so much. He has like a picture of Max on his desk after he passed away. And it's like, then why
Gabriel.
did you treat him like, oh yeah, sorry. He had a picture of Gabriel. Then why did you treat him like that? Why did you try to
I
like,
think he was like he wants what he can't have, and like also a mixture of like you don't know what you got till it's gone type thing. And so as much as he did love his brother, he wanted to either be his brother or be better than his brother.
yeah, it's a real like, you know who else needs counseling? Max.
Max does. Hope he's well.
Um, absolutely. You know what? Everyone go to therapy.
Yeah, it's good
So
for you.
Alicia's father, on the other hand, so he, it was revealed that Alicia overheard him asking, why did it have to be her? Why didn't Alicia die instead? And Alicia responded by saying to Paul, Dad just killed me. And so her father hanged himself. He could not cope when his wife died. And Alicia, in response, took an overdose of pills and like had a mental breakdown. And so Thea was like, oh, she must have loved him a lot then. And Paul was like, no, Alicia didn't love him. She hated her father. She despised him. She hated him ever since she was a kid, ever since her mother died. So that's heavy. um,
So do
and
you think
again,
like she tried to kill herself because of what her father said?
it's possible. It's possible that it's like specifically because of that, but I just wonder because she was already like so like mentally unstable
Yeah.
and she's dealing with the grief of like all of these feelings are coming back up because like it's linked to her mother dying too.
Yeah.
And so it's like all of the grief is like overwhelming. And I'm not sure she ever like was able to healthily like deal with
Mm-mm.
the trauma of her mother dying. And then this just kind of like brings it all up. So I think she probably was just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Because
Well, and
she
I think
definitely didn't care that her dad died. Like that's not what it was.
no.
No.
I think like too, that's why Theo was so drawn to her as well, because like especially after he knew like she had tried to overdose that first time with pills, which is how he had tried to initially kill himself as well. He was just like, oh yeah, this was meant to be.
Two peas in a pod, girl.
He's like, girl, me too.
And then, okay, lastly, I just want to talk about the twist at the end because
Yeah.
it freaking got me. Like, Okay, so I have pages 311 marked.
Like, I think what like hit me so hard too was like if you go back to when we very first meet Theo, when he's talking about waiting in line to like go see her artwork and everything, it's just what you initially asked, why was he so obsessed with her? Like, how did he hear about her? That should have been like our initial clue. Like, why is this man standing outside her art exhibit, like watching like her painting and like seeing what she did when like no
It
one knew
absolutely
about
was
her?
weird, and it did cross my mind as weird, but I was like, I don't know. I guess he's just weird.
Yeah, like that should have been our first clue.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that he literally quit his job and applied for a new job to go work with
Yeah.
her.
Well, and we didn't even know that he had moved his family, like had uprooted them and like all this stuff. Like that's crazy.
My man's was unhinged. Okay, so what I have flagged here. So on page 311, this is Alicia's diary entry about what really went down when Theo broke into her house. So it's like a parallel of what happened with her father, obviously. So Gabriel and I were alone. He was sobbing, crying, barely able to form words. He just kept calling my name, wailing, Alicia, Alicia. I remained silent. And then again, he calls. I remained silent. How could I talk? Gabriel had sentenced me to death. The dead don't talk. So it's like, my dad just killed me. It's the same thing. She's reliving that trauma.
Right.
So she walks around and faces him. Tears are streaming down his cheeks. And he's like, Alicia, you're alive. Thank God. And she said, I wish I could say I struck for the, oh, wow. I wish I could say I struck a blow for the defeated, that I was standing up for the betrayed and brokenhearted, that Gabriel had a tyrant's eyes, my father's eyes. But I'm past lying now. The truth is, Gabriel had my eyes suddenly, and I had his. Somewhere along the way, we had swapped places. I saw it now. I would never be safe, never be loved. All my hopes dashed, all my dreams shattered, leaving nothing, nothing. My father was right. I didn't deserve to live. I was nothing. That's what Gabriel did to me. That's the truth. I didn't kill Gabriel. He killed me. All I did was pull the trigger. So she has a complete fucking switcheroo. She's like, Gabriel and I switched places. Like, he was my whole world, the thing keeping me alive, and now I am what's standing between his like life and death, and like I'm calling the shots, and like I am his god basically, when he had been hers. And so she was like,
it's very powerful.
It was. I'm not going to go so far as to say empowering, because then she did shoot a man in the face, and we don't do that. We do not encourage that. But yeah, it was definitely it was a villain origin story for Miss Alicia Berenson.
Well, and I think too that's why she like like reacted the way that she did when she found out like who Theo was, because like she had, finally built the trust to like start talking and whatever, and then she recognizes who he is and she flips, like attacks him.
She's like, you motherfucker.
I know. It's just like she was done so dirty so many times in her life.
I know. And so that's why I'm like, again, like I get it. She is a murderer. That sucks. You shouldn't murder people. But I just feel bad for her. Like she got ragged on from day one, dude.
But yeah, I mean, altogether, I loved the book. I thought it was great. It was poetic justice. I do wish we knew what happened to her. Honestly, like she wants to die.
Yeah.
Like she got what she wanted in the end. So
I do I think because she is basically brain dead, like there's probably a certain amount of time at which there would be like I'm assuming the facility, like the Grove, has some kind of like medical, like, I don't know, power of attorney. Yeah. Although I guess would Max? I don't know. Yeah.
Well, her aunt and cousin.
Maybe her aunt. But I don't know.
Her aunt would take her off of life support in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Her aunt would be like, die, bitch. Yeah, but I choose to believe she just went peacefully.
I hope she did.
Yeah.
I
Poor,
hope Theo
poor
goes to
Alicia
jail.
Berenson. Yeah, he most certainly will. He done did a lot.
I mean,
A
he
lot of
didn't
fucked up
technically
things.
kill anybody except for Alicia.
He did, yeah. He at least, I think, I don't know if she gets taken off life support. I don't know if that counts as like her being
No,
murdered.
that's murder.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I didn't know like if there was like some stipulation to that.
No.
But yeah, absolutely. He is responsible for her death. And he is indirectly a catalyst for Gabriel's death. I won't say he's responsible because Alicia
He didn't pull the trigger.
But yeah, he provoked it. He created the situation in which it occurred.
You know what else sucked too? Was that like when he confronted Christopher or whatever, and was that his name Christian? No, Christian. When he confronted him, he's like, why didn't you say anything? He's like, why didn't you go up like and say anything to the jury? And he's like, why didn't you testify? It's like, why didn't you testify? You caused this.
Yeah, I was there. I'm actually the one who tied them up.
What the fuck, bro? Why didn't you say anything?
Yeah, Theo is very misguided. He is my boy. He is unhealed. But anyway, join us next week for another episode of Poetry Corner. We will be reading poems by Buddy Wakefield.
Yeah, and don't forget to email us with any book recommendations that you have or anything that you want to discuss with us on the show. And we're super excited for Poetry Corner next week. And as always,
let's get lit.